the motor activity of gut, and this session is particularly about the food processing inside the oral cavity, including mastication and the swallow. So we will be looking into the detailed mechanism of these two aspects majorly. So starting from mastication, mastication is simply chewing. Whenever we intake the food, first we chew it into smaller pieces, make a food bolus, only then we can swallow those foods. So the function of this chewing that we do is simply to break up the large food particles and mix it with the salivary gland secretion that will aid in swallowing and digestion. Because of this mastication, the food bolus has homogenized food particles with the secretions, which makes it easy for swallowing, as well as increases the surface area of the particles for initiating the process of digestion. Impact of particle size is huge on swallowing. Larger particles, if not masticated, can cause painful contractions of the esophageal muscles, whereas smaller particles, if swallowed without saliva and without forming a bolus, this can also make the swallowing difficult. So mastication importance is twofold, not only to divide it into the smaller particles, but also to homogenize it with the salivary secretions in order to make a smooth surface bolus. Optimal number of chews may vary from the type of foods. However, average 20 to 25 chews are recommended per bite. Edentulous patients, means those do not having teeth, are however restricted to a soft diet and they cannot masticate and properly formate the food bolus from the larger food particles. Mastication involves a major role of the teeth, particularly the incisors and the molars. Incisors, the front pointed teeth, they are for providing the cutting action on the food, whereas the molars, they are responsible for grinding it into smaller particles. The neural control of chewing is because of the muscles of mastication, and these muscles of mastication, like masseter, are supplied by the motor branch of fifth cranial nerve, that is the trigeminal nerve. And this neural control is under the influence of the mastication center, which is present inside the reticular areas in the brainstem, close to the taste center. In addition, hypothalamus, amygdala, cerebral cortex, near sensory areas for taste and smell. These are also responsible for modulating the neural control of mastication. If we look at the mechanism of chewing, it's a neural reflex which is initiated by the stimulus, and the stimulus over here is the food bolus. The food bolus in the mouth is going to initiate this chewing reflex, which will lead to reflex inhibition of the mastication muscles. As the mastication muscles will be inhibited, lower jaw will be dropped. As soon as the lower jaw drops, the stretching of the muscles of mastication will lead to activation of this stretch reflex. As you remember from your knowledge of CNS physiology, this is stretch reflex is a spinal cord reflex which leads to contraction of the muscle upon stretching. So as the lower jaw dropped, muscles of mastication were stretched, stretch reflex initiated, that led to contraction of the muscles of mastication, which resulted in rebound contraction. The jaw raised up and compressed the food bolus. This food bolus will again lead to reflex inhibition of the muscles, jaw dropping, stretch reflex, upward movement, and this will be continuing repeatedly until the food bolus is sent back of the mouth for the swallowing. So starting from the food bolus, the jaw drops because of the reflex inhibition. This jaw drops leads to the stretch of the muscles of mastication. This Stretch reflex then causes upward movements of the jaw and the bolus is pressed, which again lead to reflex inhibition, jaw drop, and this keeps on going until required. So this is how the mastication of food occurs. Once the mastication has occurred and food is sent back to the posterior part of the mouth, here the swallowing process will begin. Other name for swallowing is deglutition. This is comprised of 3 stages: voluntary stage, esophageal, and pharyngeal stages. The voluntary stage is the only voluntary stage in the swallowing, whereas the pharyngeal and esophageal stages are, of course, involuntary. Voluntary stage includes the movement of the food bolus from mouth to the pharynx. Pharyngeal stage will move the food bolus from the pharynx to the esophagus. Esophageal stage will involve the transport of the food from lower part of the pharynx, or you may say upper part of the esophagus, to the stomach. So how does it occur? Starting from the oral stage, in which tongue is responsible for this voluntary stage of swallowing. Simply, the tongue moves upwards and backwards to move the food bolus into the posterior part of the mouth. This is a voluntary action, and the pressure of the tongue by moving upward and backward pushes the food bolus. As you can appreciate over here, the food bolus has moved from here to the posterior part of the mouth. As soon as the food bolus reaches the posterior part of the mouth or pharyngeal opening, the reflex is initiated for the pharyngeal stage of swallowing. This stage involves inhibition of the respiratory center, and the message is sent directly from the swallowing center to the respiratory center to temporarily cease the respiration, and we also call this deglutition apnea. This is just too brief that we do not even appreciate it in normal life. Next, elevation of uvula to prevent the food passage into nasal passageways. As you can appreciate, in this image, the uvula is depressed and this entryway is open. Later on, the elevation of uvula close this passageway so that the food bolus cannot enter into the nasal passageways. Also, the position of tongue is maintained so that the food cannot re-enter the mouth. So its entry over here and over here is blocked. Third important thing is to prevent its entry into the respiratory passageways. How it is brought upon? By the tight approximation of the vocal cords. As you can see, this is open, and here the approximation of vocal cords have closed the glottis opening. Also, to provide further protection, epiglottis is moved posteriorly over the larynx to close the opening of trachea, and the food can now only enter into the pharynx and move towards the esophagus, as its entry into nasal cavity, mouth oral cavity, or the respiratory passageway is closed. As the food reaches the pharynx, the contraction of pharyngeal musculature will occur and the food will enter from the pharyngoesophageal sphincter into the esophagus. As soon as it enters the esophagus, the third stage of swallowing will begin. And the food, as had entered into the esophagus, this pharyngoesophageal sphincter will close again, and you can see the glottic opening has again opened and the air can now enter into the larynx. As this epiglottis was before moved backwards to close this laryngeal opening, in this image you can see it has turned back to its original location so that air can enter into the respiratory tract. Normally, this pharyngoesophageal sphincter is kept closed so that the air should not be continuously entering into the GIT, gastrointestinal tract, rather just going into the respiratory tract. Now the food is moving down the esophagus by the peristalsis of the esophageal musculature. This is the third stage of swallowing. There is another sphincter at the lower end of the esophagus. There was pharyngoesophageal sphincter at the upper end of the esophagus, and this is the lower esophageal sphincter, which is present at the junction of the gastric and esophagus. We also call it gastroesophageal junction. This is normally kept tonically closed until a food bolus arrived. As the food bolus is arriving, the waves of peristalsis open this sphincter in anticipation, and we call it receptive relaxation. So, peristalsis is propelling the food bolus down, gastroesophageal sphincter has relaxed, and the food bolus has entered into the stomach, and this is the completion of the stage of swallowing. So, we will look into the theoretical detail one by one of all these stages. Voluntary stage, food is voluntarily squeezed or rolled back into the pharynx by the movement of the tongue upwards and backwards. After this, the swallowing will become automatic and cannot be stopped. Pharyngeal stage of swallowing includes this reflex arc by the stimulus, which is the food bolus, either into the posterior part of the mouth or the pharynx. Receptors over there are the epithelial swallowing receptors around the pharyngeal opening or the tonsillar pillars. Afferent nerve that carried the message of swallowing away was the fifth cranial nerve, that is trigeminal, and ninth cranial nerve, glossopharyngeal, 10th cranial nerve, vagus nerve. All three supplying around the posterior part of the mouth or the pharynx. The message is carried to the deglutition or swallowing center, which is present in the brainstem around the nucleus ambiguus and nucleus of tractus solitarius. The message is carried back by the efferent nerve called 5, 7, 9, 10 and 12th nerve along with the superior cervical nerves. This message is carried back to the effector organs for the pharyngeal stage of swallowing. The effector organs in the pharyngeal stage of swallowing include the uvula moved, like the soft palate movement, like the movement of the vocal cords, like the opening of the pharyngoesophageal sphincter, and we are quickly going to review that again. Soft palate elevation was to close the entry to the posterior nares. Palatopharyngeal folds also approximate to form a sagittal slit. The purpose is to allow only the small size bolus to pass and obstruct the large objects from entering the pharynx and esophagus. Third, the larynx and epiglottis movement. Vocal cords approximate medially. Larynx moves upward and forward. Epiglottis moves backwards so that the epiglottis can cover the tracheal opening of this epiglottis and food cannot enter into the trachea. Esophageal opening, which was otherwise closed, is opened. How? One by opening of the upper esophageal sphincter and second by the movement of the larynx. Larynx, when backward, was pushing against the upper end of the esophagus, which was constricted. As the larynx moves forward, the upper end of esophagus is relatively now open and capable of receiving food if the upper esophageal sphincter relaxes, which was otherwise kept closed to prevent the entry of the air into the esophagus. Inside the pharynx, the pharyngeal muscles are going to contract in sequence to propel the food into esophagus. So, swallowing center is in the brainstem, which is initiated by the movement of the food bolus into the posterior part of the mouth and pharynx. Soft palate elevation occurs to prevent the food regurgitation into nasal cavities. Palatopharyngeal folds move medially to allow the passage of only properly masticated food. Entry to nose and trachea is avoided by vocal cord approximation. Laryngeal and epiglottic movement. Esophageal opening is opened by the movement of the larynx as well as relaxation of upper esophageal sphincter. Food enters into the stomach by the propulsion into the by the peristalsis of the pharyngeal musculature. And this is showing the same series of events, the movement of the uvula and soft palate upwards, the movement of the epiglottis and larynx over here, and the opening of the upper esophageal sphincter over here and reclosure after the food has entered into the esophagus. So this is the pharyngeal stage of swallowing, which is completed in 2 seconds involuntary, and the cessation of breathing during that part is known as deglutition apnea. Esophageal stage of swallowing involves the movement of the food from pharynx to the stomach by the peristalsis of the esophageal musculature. As the food enters into the esophagus, the pharyngeal peristalsis is carried forward to the esophageal musculature, and we call it primary peristalsis. This is going to take 8 to 10 seconds. Although the gravity has a facilitatory role, this is not necessarily required. It speeds up the movement, but if someone is upright down, still they can ingest and swallow the material in 8 to 10 seconds. And if gravity assists, that can be speed up to 5 to 8 seconds. Secondary peristalsis is sometimes initiated if the peristalsis occurred, food entered the stomach, but some part of the food bolus remained in the esophagus. This will now initiate the secondary peristalsis by including not only the reflexes of the vagus nerve and coming back through glossopharyngeal and vagus efferents, but also via the intrinsic neuronal circuits of the myenteric nervous plexus present inside the esophagus. Upper third of esophagus is striated and supplied by the glossopharyngeal and vagus nerve, whereas lower 2/3 of the esophagus is composed of smooth muscles, which is supplied by the vagus nerve. The upper end of the stomach as well as the lower esophageal sphincter open up when the wave of peristalsis reaches over there and the food bolus is still behind. So these are relaxed to welcome the food even before the food has reached mechanically over here, and we call this phenomena receptive relaxation. So it does not occur that the food comes, strike this part and then it opens. Rather, it is opened in anticipation because of the faster moving peristaltic wave. The function of lower esophageal sphincter is very important. This is kept tonically constricted at the junction of stomach and esophagus, and in normal state its pressure is about 30 millimeters of mercury. This is only relaxed by the incoming peristaltic waves. If it fails to relax in response to this, we call this condition achalasia, which will result in difficult swallowing. And if it fails to contract normally, the food content will reflux back from the stomach to the esophagus, resulting in gastroesophageal reflux disorder, again an abnormal condition. We will be discussing these two when we will be discussing the clinical correlations of swallowing. Lower esophageal sphincter is composed of 3 components, including the smooth muscles of the lower esophageal part, extrinsic component coming from the crural fibers of the diaphragm, and the oblique fibers of the stomach. All 3 in combination keep this area tonically constricted until needed for the swallowing. Here, this is the diagrammatic representation, the squamocolumnar junction between the esophagus and stomach, and the esophageal smooth muscles, crural fibers of the diaphragm, and the sling fibers of the stomach. All 3 forming the lower esophageal sphincter in combination. This lower esophageal sphincter is regulated by the nervous control. Acetylcholine from the vagal nerve endings keeps it tonically constricted until there is release of nitric oxide or vasoactive intestinal peptide, which signals for the relaxation of the lower esophageal sphincter. Prevention of gastroesophageal reflux is made possible by the tonic constriction of the lower esophageal sphincter. In addition, there are other anatomical considerations which prevent the gastroesophageal reflux, including that a short portion of the esophagus extends into the stomach, forming a valve-like closure. As the pressure inside the stomach increases or the stomach muscles contract, that portion of the esophagus entering into the stomach is also contracted, resulting in prevention of the gastroesophageal reflux. A third important thing is its positioning, as the esophagus, you can say, is not entering at the top of the stomach like that, rather caving obliquely on this end of the stomach. So this also acts like a valve-like action. When the intra-abdominal pressure increases, this is rather pinched, preventing the reflux of any content from the stomach to the esophagus. So if this tone is normal, it can prevent the reflux and ease the swallowing by receptively relaxing. But if abnormal, it can result in achalasia and GERD, which we will be discussing in a separate session of clinical correlations. That's all about the mastication and swallowing. Thank you.